by the Thornton brothers. As read by R. Michael Gull.
I was siphoning by mouth a gallon or two of gasoline out of an abandoned sun-baked Honda Civic when it bit me. Delirious, my senses fevered and dulled by sleepless nights and dehydration and the constant cycling charge and dissipation of panic that's left all of us survivors reeling like human capacitors. I didn't even hear the foot dragger close in on me from the darkened tree line. It was only when the rancid, downwind smell of it hit me that I realized a rotter was behind me. By then it was too late. Its heavy, rigid, waxy arms took hold of me. One over my right shoulder, the other under my left arm, and constricted as it attempted to strike at my jugular with rotted yellow, jigsaw teeth framed by clot-black blood. I turned into its grip, and those zippered, chipped incisors found my left shoulder instead. But still the creature dug in deep, and instantly the thing began to suck with such force it felt as though all the blood in my body stopped in its tracks, reversed course, and started for the wound. I managed to get the length of brittle, once-green garden hose I was siphoning with around its head, and pried with all my waning might, and finally the phlegmy dead man's mouth was torn away, taking a piece of my shoulder with it. As it lurched back towards me again, I came down hard on it with the length of iron pipe I carried in a makeshift scabbard, fashioned from a discarded pool cue holster I fixed to my belt with zip ties. Caught it right about where it had bitten me, tit for tat, near the shoulder, and the pipe tore through its desiccated hide paper flesh and brickled bone, littering the gasolined ground with the ribs and wretched, unrecognizable organs. It writhed, not out of pain, but in faint acknowledgement of mechanical failure and loss of locomotion, and I wondered what it was that still compelled them to always be moving forward, so starved for water and nutrients as they were. What invasive biological organism or chemical agent could do that? What form of radiation, or dare I say magic, worked its joints and processed the light those now shrunken, shriveled eyes took in? Well, I might never divine what drives the stumblers onward or what started it all, but I do know what stops the damn things in their tracks for good. I lit a strike anywhere off the heel of my boot and dropped it into the grass, careful to take a step back as the spilled petrol ignited and the foot dragger went up like some doomed effigy wrought of paper mache. No scream, no cry for help. That made it much easier to kill one when you had to, at least. Helped you to forget that just mere weeks, if not days or even hours ago, this figure you committed to flame or scattered leathery litter on the ground was a man or a woman, father or mother, or brother or sister, or, worst of all and guaranteed, a son or a daughter. People with lives and loves and dreams, now relegated to lumbering, blood-mad husks of festering flesh and soul, dastardly intention. The undead lived only to kill. After allowing myself mesmerization by the blue flames and wilting corpse a moment or two longer than I safely should have, I turned my eyes back to the tree line and watched a while for more lurchers before reluctantly assessing the bite mark. I didn't want to look. I looked. It was bad. Goddamn. Months now I'd been out in the wild, following my stolen compass in the rivers and ghostly highways north, avoiding the infected and anxious solitude to save a week or two in the company of others on a similar quest to find their loved ones in homes at all costs. Before a hissing deader sprang out from the shadows in a ransacked grocery or out from under the hood of a rusted engineless truck lying forsaken in the reeds near some remote filling station and stopped their pilgrimages cold, sending them on a new course for a new quarry, the transformation, and a raging hunger for human blood and hearts and jaundiced, fatty American livers. That was the world we now inhabited, one of fictions, of movies and video games and doomsday novels. Nightmares had become now. There had indeed been an inexplicable apocalypse that caused the first to turn. That much we knew. Only no one knows how it started, or even where. There was speculation. We've taken too many antibiotics, it's the superbug, or came on that small asteroid that flattened trees in Montana, or this is the end of days as prophesied in the Bible. Some said it sprang from the ruined plastic oceans, its plague.
Others hypothesized it came out of the deep-reach logging acreage of South America, a pox unleashed for our hubris against flowering branch and stalk. But that's all we had to go on, a handful of scattered theories and hearsay. And then, when the signals were no longer sent or received a couple of weeks later, we were all left to wonder and to fend for ourselves.
Electronics had failed us. Technology was slung back to the days of steam and lever, if not club and spear. But there were guns, of course, and always would be now. I hated guns, historically, until my first encounter with a husk. Never even went hunting with my father. I left that honor to my younger sister, Teresa, caught no slight amount of ridicule for it. There's nothing quite like an undead body trying to force you to join its ranks to make one come around on the Second Amendment. I wish now I'd taken heed and stocked up like some of our prepper neighbors I'd been so quick to consider loons and paranoiacs and mongers of fear. I wondered of my family, how they fared. Not whether they lived or didn't, be it dead or undead. I could ill afford such doubts if I were to continue on with the grueling trek. I wondered of their current state, how they were holding up emotionally, if they were despondent and without hope. I was always a cynic, the resident bookworm amongst simple woodsmen and soot-faced Pennsylvania miners and foundrymen. But I'd since come to the conclusion that here and now, hope is all we have. It was nearly 4 months ago that I left my wife and son and 2 young daughters in Elwood City, a small blemish of a steel town 30 miles northwest of Pittsburgh, known for its noxious farting metalworks and foundry, and as the hometown of Chicago Cubs great Hack Wilson. For what was supposed to be 2 quick days away, attending the Port of Tampa Steel Conference and Trade Show, at behest of my employer, Global Metal Reclamators, Inc. I was sent down there in mid-February. When the foot draggers started showing up in numbers here and there around the nation, there was a week or two where the media sounded the trumpets as street-level bath salt use on the rise. But it was soon after that we knew the growing epidemic to be something else altogether. Something that was much more potent and malignant and destined to change the course of human history. It was days before I came to and realized it wasn't all a dream. That I was indeed living in a reality of sirens and quarantines and concertina wire. And that I was not alone. In the opening weeks, there was widespread murmuring panic, but it was met with reassurance from the officials. I was corralled with the others, forced to stay in lockdown in Tampa. Hotels were commandeered by the military, and we were told at the barrels of weapons by barking voices that we were not to leave, that we could receive no visitors. We communicated through our phones at first, checked in, made sure loved ones were safe and secure. But when the darkness came, all of that went away, and we were left with only doubt and worry. And soon followed hopelessness, for most. But I could not give up hope. I refused. I would find them one way or the other. By foot or hoof or ever-changing tread, I would make my way true north from Tampa through Georgia and into the borderlands between Tennessee and North Carolina until I witnessed the hollers and mines of West Virginia. My feet found the familiar banks of the Monongahela, and I would follow its winding way until it met the Ohio, whose shores I would travel to Beaver Falls, and once there, I knew the roads to walk by road. And do all that I had. In the passing months, since the lights were snuffed and the phones and computers and radios were rendered, at least for now it seemed, obsolete.
I'd been following the Monongahela for the better part of 2 weeks now on foot, after having leapfrogged from one abandoned vehicle to another when possible.
You'd be surprised at how uneventful it was most times. Travel was fraught with anxiety, don't get me wrong, but true adversity was mostly the result of hunger and thirst and exposure and jangled nerves. The one who bit me was only the 3rd dead man I'd encountered and had to face alone.
Well, 4th, I suppose, as the 2nd encounter was with that of a shambling housewife, lower class, fat and unruly, and only freshly turned by way of a bite on her butterfly-tattooed calf, courtesy of the tiny undead blood-starved tyke who rode on her flabby hip as they came bounding for me like hungry hounds to a buckshot bird.
Though the harried pair followed for a good 6 blocks through the desolate streets of a small town in central Georgia whose name escapes me, they were easily outpaced. Less so was my first encounter with a tall, rangy, powerfully built young black man somewhere in the Spanish Moss wilds between Lake City and Live Oak, Florida. Probably a gifted athlete in life, though now missing everything below the knee of his left leg. He still managed to gain ground on me by scampering on his hands and one foot, until I summoned the courage to turn on him and unload the only 2 rounds of grape shot held in a sawed-off double-barreled shotgun I'd procured from the back window of an abandoned pickup truck that was left, unfortunately, without the company of its keys. Twin blasts exploded a hole through the damn thing's chest and took half of its careening head off, and with it, that most insatiable and unholy of hungers. I'd once seen a late-night YouTube video summarizing what might transpire were the bottom to suddenly drop out of the US dollar. Famine was but 3 days away, it warned. Wars waged for bottled clean water, and food and gasoline and ammunition. 3 days. That's all the dollar and our economy bought us in the end. 3 days. Is it any wonder that the landscape had gone nightmarish in the months that followed? I heard from the random weary traveler that there were cities in which efforts at order were still being made, and I wondered if Pittsburgh was one of them. If my family would be secured or left on the homestead to fend for themselves. I trust they could hold out for a while, depending on the number of debtors stumbling around Beaver and Lawrence counties. Charlie was as much a leader as myself, less prone to flares of ill temper or exasperation, truth be told. She was a rock on which the kids could rely. Bradley was my oldest, my only boy, a sure shot with his squirrel gun and fondness for firecrackers that had him in hot water a time or two, but might serve most useful in these trying times. He and Charlie would look over my girls. My girls. Their names on the tip of my parched tongue, their faces clear as day, but their names escaped me. I took off my shirt, realized I was flushed with heat. How could I not remember the names of my own? It was the bite. Already I felt its effects as flies began to buzz around it. I was most likely another 2 days from home on foot. How long did the change take from the first gnaw of an infected mouth? What would I be by the time I left the river's bank and headed north of Beaver Falls? Would I be the proud father? Proud I was. Never in my life had I felt like such a man, capable of forging ahead no matter the adversity as I had in these past months of dangerous travel and isolation. I found a resourcefulness and resiliency and independence residing in myself that I never knew lay dormant like some slumbering volcano, just waiting for the tectonic shift that would force it to erupt. And I was so close. So fucking close when that goddamn monstrosity took its pound of flesh and left in its place a violent curse that set at the speed of concrete. How many miles was I out from my destination? I consulted my compass, my map. 40 miles or so. 40 miles to home, to them. I'd come over 1,000, slowed by hunger and twisted ankles and stalled engines and other hiccups along the way. But I'd been marching through the wasteland of this once great nation, and now my plot and home, my beloved blood itself, was within reach. But I feared I would not make this last leg before the turning was complete. I had to hurry. There was no time to waste. I picked up the pace, but within an hour I was vomiting blood into the river, and the sunlight made my eyes feel as though they were in a vice. Still I forged ahead. My mind on the prize, just one last longing look at them, even if only from the fence line. If I could never again feel Charlie's lips on my own, or clasp my teenage son's hand in mine, or hug my young daughters close, the crushing journey and even the infecting bite of the sick specimen would have been worth it to do all that but once more. I realized I'd forgotten his name as well, my boy. Then I remembered he was a junior. His name was mine. But I could no longer recall my own. I wondered what it was that was swimming in me now, stealing my memories, taking them from me even before death does. What did it look like under a microscope? Was it a virus, bacterial? Were they shaped like corkscrews or vicious little diamonds? Or was it just the decay? The fraying of synapses in a brain spoiling like picnic mayonnaise left out in the sun? My mind trailed off, and soon all I could actively think of was the thirst. I knelt down and cupped my hands and drank from the river's sediment waters, but the thirst was not abated. In fact, it grew and grew, and then turned to gnawing hunger, until one was indistinguishable from the other, and it was all boiled down to want, and soon after need. I needed, but did not yet understand what, or did not want to admit what.
My joints began to ache in ways they had not yet known. And trust me when I say this journey has been pure, relentless toil. And my ankles and knees and back had experienced through its gauntlet every ache and pain imaginable. And that's just what this new malady was in nature. A pain unimaginable. It was sharp and dull all at once, on fire and throbbing that I shivered with chills. My testicles ached, my stomach lurched. I puked more blood and bile into the reeds and crabgrass of the river's edge. But I forged ahead. Pittsburgh came into view, lightless structures looming through the pervasive fog that smoked the dark green hills and valleys. I checked my pulse as I walked, afraid to find it diminished, but instead found it racing. My vision blurred, came back, blurred again, and I was at times on the verge of fainting, but always I kept on towards now. Charlie, my wife, my children. Charlie, my wife, my children. Charlie, my wife, my children.
I droned it aloud with each dragging step, afraid that if I did not voice her name, it would be lost in the current with those of my dear children.
Charlie, my wife, my children.
I said it until my parched, withered tongue could no longer make the precise sounds. I lost language, and with it I feared soon the last of my humanity. I was too far gone to pass for healthy or uninfected, even with the clean shirt I'd taken out of a deserted home since the bite. I had to avoid the city. I'd be shotgunned and burned on sight in this condition, rightfully so. As I made my way through the western suburbs of Pittsburgh, careful to avoid the airport since it had been overtaken by the military, to stumble too close would surely spell my doom as much as that long-gone rotter did when it bit me. I lost the mantra. It simply became
my wife, my children,
and then
wife, children,
and then simply, after a while,
them.
It was maybe 2 miles from the banks of the Ohio that I realized the constant, ubiquitous buzzing I'd heard the last few hours was not the cloud of flies that boarded and alighted and fucked in my festering wound, but the world itself. It was all I heard now. A dull, throbbing buzz. No birds, not the sound of my shuffling feet or the wind in the leaves. Perhaps my eardrums had begun to rot. It mattered not, I was close. Close to them. I found the river's edge again as the sun set. There were firelights in the distance, my ears buzzed, but the pain in my joints was gone. I checked my pulse. I felt nothing. Nothing but hunger. Thirst. I looked to the other side of the river. I looked down, took stones up from the bank, bought them out of the mud, filled my pockets with them. I stepped into the dark waters. I do not know how long it took to cross, but the waters ran deep, and I found myself mired for a long time at the bottom of the river. I did not need to breathe, nor did I panic. I just marched on, always toward them, my true north. Them. Whatever their names were. My ebbing mind was still in there somewhere, clinging to distant cobwebs. It felt far away and impossible to access, but at times it just rang out from the ethereal distance. Reminded me I was human, if only for mere moments more. The transformation was catastrophically close, but not yet complete. At the river's deepest depths, I opened my mouth and took what would constitute a ragged, bold breath for a man still living, and it filled me with brackish water and made me heavy, as did the stones in my pockets, but for all that water, it did nothing to quench the thirst that raged inside me. The hunger. I found the incline and dragged my feet through the gluey mud of the riverbed until I came back out of it into the black night of a lightless world. sopping and dripping with the waters of the river and my own seeping fluid. And I still put one foot in front of the other. One bare as I lost its boot in the muck of the Ohio, the other dragging its heavy waterlogged boot behind. I was one of them. A foot dragger. A deader. I could no longer call the roads I traversed familiar, though I'd walked, biked, and driven them thousands and thousands of times in life. Still I followed a course, compelled by something locked away like some stolen treasure. They were still in there somewhere in my stifled heart. If not my ravaged brain, I would see them one more time, if only from the tree line. Then, another road. I took it. One foot, then the other. No feeling, save this unfair thirst. This furious hunger. This pain. White house. Light in windows. Burns eyes. Movement at the door. It burns. Running towards me in the dark. Too dark to see. Me. Burns. Please. Don't. Thirst. Hunger. Running. Into my arms. Hunger. Smile. Gone. I know now. But it's too late.